When a powerful woman stands outside a single father's apartment just after midnight, makeup streaked and voice unsteady, nothing ordinary is about to happen. Daniel Brooks would remember that knock for the rest of his life, even though at the time he didn't yet understand why it mattered. To understand what followed, the story has to begin earlier, in quiet routines and small moments that seemed forgettable until they weren't. 3 weeks before that night, Daniel was riding the elevator down alone. He worked on the 5th floor in compliance auditing, the kind of department most employees only remembered when something went wrong. He was on the phone with Ethan's elementary school office, apologizing again for being late to pick up. He lowered his voice as the elevator descended, promising for the 3rd time that month that he would be there. "I'm always there," he said, like it was a fact that didn't need explaining. The elevator stopped on the 31st floor, the doors opened and Victoria Lang stepped inside. Daniel recognized her instantly. Everyone in the building did. Victoria Lang was the CEO, the woman credited with taking a struggling logistics company and turning it into a global powerhouse in under 6 years. She carried herself with a kind of certainty that suggested she had never questioned whether she belonged anywhere she stood. Daniel finished the call quietly. Victoria didn't acknowledge him, he didn't expect her to. But just before the elevator reached the lobby, she turned her head slightly, not enough to look at him directly, but enough to let him know she had been listening. Daniel stepped out first, nodded politely without making eye contact, and walked toward the parking garage. He didn't think about it again. Victoria did. A week later, Daniel found himself sitting in a conference room he had never been invited into before. His manager had called in sick, and someone needed to present the compliance audit summary during a merger review. Daniel sat at the far end of the table, surrounded by executives, invisible among tailored suits and confident voices, waiting for his few minutes to pass. The meeting unraveled quickly. Numbers conflicted. Projections were missed. Tension thickened the air. When frustration peaked, the head of operations pointed sharply at the screen. He blamed compliance for the discrepancy, his voice loud and impatient. Every face turned toward Daniel, the lowest-ranking person in the room, the only black man at the table. Daniel could have stayed quiet. That was what he had always done. Silence had kept him employed. Silence had kept him safe. Instead, he opened his laptop. His voice was calm when he spoke. He explained that the figures submitted by compliance were accurate and that the discrepancy came from a revised adjustment requested by operations months earlier. He pulled up the email chain and approval timestamps and turned his screen toward the table. The room went silent. The head of operations opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Victoria spoke from the head of the table. She thanked Daniel and asked him to send the documents to her office. Daniel nodded and said nothing more. When the meeting ended, he caught Victoria watching him from across the room, her expression unreadable. That afternoon, Victoria asked her assistant 2 questions. The name of the auditor who had spoken up, and where he lived. 3 weeks after the elevator ride, 1 week after the meeting, Victoria Lang stood outside Daniel Brooks's apartment just after midnight. Her voice cracked as she spoke. She admitted she knew it was inappropriate, that she knew it could cost him his job, but she didn't know where else to go. Daniel's mind raced through every possible consequence. A single father, a powerful CEO, midnight, one accusation could erase everything he had built. Down the hall, Ethan slept, clutching a worn stuffed dinosaur Daniel had bought from a thrift store. Daniel thought of the lessons he tried to teach his son, about kindness and not turning away from people who needed help. He told Victoria she could stay 15 minutes and asked her to keep her voice down. She nodded immediately. Inside the apartment, Victoria moved like someone entering a place she had only seen in photographs. Her eyes traced the worn couch, the crookedly taped drawings on the refrigerator, the stack of children's books on the coffee table. She sat down and stared at the wall. Then she broke. The crying came hard and unfiltered. She admitted her husband had been cheating for 2 years. That they had signed the divorce papers that night. That when she returned to her penthouse, no one had called, not one person. She had hundreds of contacts, but none of them asked if she was okay. Daniel listened in silence. Victoria wiped her face and told him about the elevator, about hearing him say, "I'm always there," like it was the simplest truth in the world. She said no one had ever said that to her. She said she just needed to sit somewhere that felt real. Daniel made tea and told her she could stay until the water cooled. They both knew she stayed longer. The next morning, Daniel avoided the executive floors. He deleted Victoria's message without replying. For days, he made himself invisible again. Until one evening, Ethan looked up from his book and asked if the sad lady was okay. Daniel realized his son had heard more than he thought. 2 weeks later, Victoria asked to meet him at a cafe. Not for work. They talked quietly. The rumors followed anyway. Whispers spread through the office. HR called Daniel in and asked direct questions. Faced with fear, Daniel lied. He walked out and saw Victoria waiting at the end of the hall. She didn't say anything. That night, Ethan asked if Daniel was scared of her. The question stayed with him. Daniel didn't sleep. The next morning, he went back to HR and corrected his statement. He told the truth, knowing it could cost him his job. Instead of fear, he felt relief. Victoria resigned soon after. Daniel wasn't promoted. He didn't care. Evenings were spent studying for certification exams at the kitchen table while Ethan colored beside him. Months later, Daniel received a photo on his phone. 3 stick figures holding hands. Underneath, in uneven letters, it read, "Daddy is brave." Daniel stood at the door longer than usual that morning before stepping outside, knowing that something had finally changed. Not his job. Not his title. Him.